The small town of Pinecrest was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. Streets lined with maple trees that turned brilliant shades of orange and red every fall. A main street with family-owned shops that had been there for generations. And rising above it all, the massive grey buildings of NextGen Industries. Lisa Chen had lived in Pinecrest her entire life. Her father had worked at NextGen, and now her husband Mike did too. The company was like a silent partner in every household conversation, provider of paychecks, healthcare, and the annual summer festival. Lisa loved her job at the Pinecrest Public Library. She wasn't just the head librarian, she was the keeper of the town's memories. All newspapers, town council minutes, historical photographs, all carefully preserved in the archive room in the basement. Most days, no one visited this dusty corner of the library, but Lisa found peace among these forgotten papers. On this particular Tuesday evening, the library was empty. Rain tapped gently against the windows as Lisa organized a donation of old files from the retired town clerk. She hadn't expected anything interesting, just property records and building permits from the 1980s. But something caught her eye. A folder labeled Water Rights, Confidential was tucked between mundane tax documents. That's odd, Lisa muttered to herself, pulling out the folder. Inside were maps of land parcels surrounding Mason Creek, Pinecrest's water source. Red circles marked properties that had been sold over the years. What made Lisa's heart beat faster was seeing the same company name appearing on dozens of purchases. Evergreen Holdings. Lisa had never heard of Evergreen Holdings, but she did know Mason Creek. Everyone in town did. It wound through the hills above Pinecrest before feeding into the reservoir that supplied their drinking water. Curious now, Lisa dug deeper into the archives. She pulled property records, old newspaper clippings, town meeting minutes. As midnight approached, her desk was covered with papers, and the pieces were starting to fit together. Evergreen Holdings wasn't the only company name she found. There was also Summit Investments, Blue Valley Enterprises, and Northern Star Group. Different names, but when she looked at the company registration details, they all led back to the same address, a law firm in the city that handled NextGen's legal affairs. "They're old shell companies," Lisa whispered. "NextGen has been buying all the land around our water supply." That alone wasn't necessarily sinister. Companies bought land all the time. But what made Lisa's skin prickle with unease was what she found next: health department reports. After each major land purchase, there were water quality assessments. The reports used technical language about acceptable levels and within normal parameters. But the dates lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. Lisa thought about her teenage daughter Mia's asthma, which seemed to get worse every year. She thought about Mr. Patel at the grocery store who had lost his wife to a rare cancer. She thought about the 3 families on Oak Street whose children had been diagnosed with the same unusual immune disorder. As rain continued to drum against the windows, Lisa stared at the documents scattered across the table. The library was silent except for the old clock ticking on the wall. She had stumbled onto something that didn't feel right. NextGen, the company that fed the town, might also be poisoning it. Lisa gathered the papers with trembling hands. This wasn't just about property records anymore. Her mind raced with questions. Why would NextGen hide behind fake company names? What were they putting into the water? Who else knew about this? She knew one thing for certain. She couldn't unknow what she had discovered. And she couldn't stay silent. But going up against NextGen meant risking everything: Mike's job, their future, maybe even their safety. Lisa looked at her phone. It was nearly 1 a.m. She took photos of the key documents before carefully returning everything to its place. Whatever happened next, she needed proof of what she'd found. The truth about NextGen was hidden in plain sight, buried in the town's own records, and now Lisa was the only one who knew. Lisa couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned, the faces of her neighbors flashing through her mind. Could their illnesses really be connected to NextGen? Or was she seeing patterns that weren't there? The next morning, after Mike left for his shift at the factory and May went to school, Lisa sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and her thoughts. The logical part of her brain said to forget what she'd found. Their mortgage depended on Mike's NextGen paycheck. But when she looked at the inhaler May had left on the counter, something hardened inside her. "I need more proof," she whispered to herself. She started small. At work, Lisa created a simple spreadsheet. She marked every address mentioned in the old health reports and compared them to a town map. By lunchtime, she was staring at a disturbing pattern. The reported illnesses clustered downstream from NextGen facilities, especially near the creek bends where water moved slowly. Lisa visited the town hall during her lunch break. The clerk at the environmental health office, an older woman named Betty who'd worked there for decades, greeted her warmly. "I'm doing research on water quality for a library display," Lisa lied, hating how easily the words came. "Do you have the public water testing reports from the last 10 years? Betty's smile faltered. "That's odd. Someone else was asking about those last year. A college student, I think. But there was a flood in the basement archive." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, it was just that section that got damaged. Convenient timing, if you ask me." Lisa felt a chill. "What do you mean?" Betty glanced around and leaned closer. "My husband worked at NextGen for 30 years before his cancer. He used to talk about the midnight dumps when they'd release things into the creek during third shift, said everyone knew but nobody talked." On her walk back to the library, Lisa noticed a black car parked across the street. A man in sunglasses sat behind the wheel, looking at his phone. When she glanced his way, he started the engine and drove off. That evening, instead of going home, Lisa drove to the edge of town. The road followed Mason Creek upstream, past the old mill and toward the hills where NextGen had its largest facility. She parked at a scenic overlook and walked down a hiking trail that ran alongside the water. The creek should have been beautiful in the golden evening light. Instead, Lisa noticed a faint chemical smell. The rocks along one bank had an unusual stain, not the natural brown of iron deposits, but something with a bluish tinge. She took photos with her phone and collected a small water sample in an empty soda bottle. Who could she trust with this? The mayor was golfing buddies with NextGen's regional director. The police chief's daughter worked in NextGen's HR department. This wasn't just a company, it was woven into the fabric of Pinecrest itself. Lisa remembered a news story from last year about water contamination in a city about 50 miles away. The reporter had seemed determined, asking tough questions that made local officials squirm. What was her name? Diane? Donna? Lisa searched online when she got home and found her, Dina Patel, environmental correspondent for the Regional Tribune. Lisa hesitated, her finger hovering over the email icon. Sending this would cross a line she couldn't uncross. Mike would be furious if he knew. The company had eyes everywhere in town. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor. "Hey, did I hear about Mr. Wilson? Diagnosed with the same thing as his wife. Doctors say it's rare to see in couples. So sad. Mr. Wilson, who grew vegetables for the whole neighborhood, who played Santa every Christmas, who lived 2 blocks downstream from the factory." Lisa started typing the email. She was about to hit send when her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Mrs. Chen?" The voice was male, unfamiliar. "My name is Thomas Reeves. I used to work in chemical disposal at NextGen. I think we need to talk." Lisa met Thomas Reeves at a diner 20 miles outside of Pinecrest. She chose the place carefully, far enough that they wouldn't run into anyone from town. Thomas was in his 60s, with calloused hands and tired eyes that had seen too much. "I worked disposal at NextGen for 22 years, he said, stirring his coffee endlessly. "Started getting headaches, nosebleeds. When I asked questions about the chemicals, they moved me to another department. Then laid me off 6 months before retirement." Lisa listened as Thomas described barrels of unlabeled waste, midnight releases into the creek, and forged documentation. Her recorder app captured everything while she took notes. "Why are you telling me this now?" she finally asked. Thomas stared into his coffee. "My granddaughter, she's 7. Born with her kidneys not right. Doctor says it's genetic, but nobody in our family ever had kidney problems. She lives downstream from the plant." His voice cracked. "I kept quiet for a paycheck while they poisoned my own blood." On the drive home, Lisa's phone rang. It was Dina Patel from the Regional Tribune. "Got your email," Dina said. "This isn't the first time I've heard complaints about NextGen, but nobody ever has proof." "I have documents," Lisa said, "and I found someone who worked there." "Meet me tomorrow," Dina replied. "Bring everything." Lisa was so distracted she almost ran a stop sign. When she looked in her rearview mirror, she noticed a blue sedan that seemed to be following her. It stayed 2 cars behind all the way to the library. She parked and watched as it drove slowly past, the driver's face hidden behind sunglasses despite the cloudy day. That night, Lisa told Mike what she'd discovered. She expected anger or disbelief, but instead, his face drained of color. "They told us the chemicals were safe," he whispered. "But there's a special ventilation system in the mixing room that they installed last year. And guys in the disposal unit get rotated out every 6 months now. They say it's for training purposes." Mike took her hands. "Be careful, Lisa. These people, they have money and lawyers. We just have the truth." The next day, Lisa met Dina at a cafe in the next town over. The journalist was younger than Lisa expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I've been trying to crack a next-gen story for years," Dina admitted. "But they're careful, very careful." As Lisa shared her findings, Dana's expression grew more serious. "This is bigger than I thought. We need more than just documents and one former employee's testimony. We need scientific proof." "How do we get that?" Lisa asked. Dana smiled for the first time. "I know someone. He's a professor at the State University, specializes in water contaminants. If anyone can analyze your samples properly, it's him." 2 days later, Lisa stood in a university laboratory, watching Dr. Alan Wong examine her water samples. He was methodical, precise, with a reputation for being impossible to bribe or intimidate. "These preliminary results are concerning," he finally said, pointing to his computer screen. "High levels of hexavalent chromium, benzene derivatives, and something I can't quite identify yet. Where did you get this water?" "Mason Creek. It feeds into our town's water supply." Dr. Wong shook his head. "If people are drinking this or even bathing in it regularly, you'd expect to see increased rates of certain cancers, respiratory issues, kidney problems." "Like my daughter's breathing problems," Lisa interrupted, "and the cancer clusters in the neighborhoods near the creek." The 3 of them, Lisa, Dina, and Dr. Wong, looked at each other, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "I'll need more samples," Dr. Wong said, "from different locations, and medical records showing the pattern of illnesses if you can get them." "I can help with the medical angle," came a voice from the doorway. They turned to see a woman in scrubs, Dr. Kathy Lin, according to her ID badge. "I'm an epidemiologist, and I grew up in Pinecrest." Lisa hadn't expected to find allies so quickly. But as they gathered around Dr. Wong's computer, planning their next steps, she realized they had formed something powerful, a team of ordinary people with extraordinary skills, each with their own reasons to fight. For the first time since finding those old documents, Lisa felt something new, hope. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning. Lisa arrived at work to find the library director waiting by her desk, face pinched with worry. "There's been a complaint," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Someone from the town council says you've been using library resources for personal projects." Lisa felt her mouth go dry. "That's not true. I've been organizing the archives, that's all." "Just be careful, Lisa. The library board has 3 next-gen executives on it." He lowered his voice. "They're asking for access to your computer." She nodded, trying to look calm while her heart raced. Thank goodness she'd kept her real research on her personal laptop and phone. But the message was crystal clear. They were watching her. That evening, Mike was unusually quiet during dinner. Finally, he pushed his plate away and looked at Lisa. "They moved me to the warehouse today," he said. "No explanation. 20 years in production, and suddenly I'm counting inventory." He rubbed his face, and Pete from HR asked if you were still playing detective with Old Town Records. May looked up from her homework. "Mom, what's going on?" Lisa forced a smile. "Nothing, honey, just some work stuff." But after May went to bed, Lisa checked all the doors and windows twice. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next day, dinner called. "We need to meet." Not over the phone. They gathered at Dr. Wong's lab. Lisa, Dina, Dr. Wong, Dr. Lin, and Thomas. As they compared notes, a disturbing pattern emerged. Thomas had received an unexpected audit notice from the IRS. Dr. Len's hospital privileges were being reviewed. Dina's editor was suddenly questioning the resources being put into the NextGen story. "They're trying to shut us down before we even publish," Dina said. Dr. Wong looked troubled. "I found something else in the water samples. A compound I've only seen in specialized industrial processes. Very toxic, very expensive to dispose of properly." "Can we prove NextGen is the source?" Lisa asked. "Not yet, but I've mapped the concentration patterns. It's highest downstream from their main facility." As they were leaving, Thomas pulled Lisa aside. "My house was broken into yesterday, nothing valuable taken, but my NextGen files are gone." Lisa felt cold fear wash over her. "I have copies of everything at home." But when she arrived home that night, she knew immediately something was wrong. The door was unlocked. Inside, drawers hung open, books were pulled from shelves, and her laptop was missing. Only Mi's school pictures remained untouched on the mantel. Mike arrived minutes after Lisa called him, his face ashen. "This is getting dangerous," he said, holding her tight. "Maybe we should stop." Lisa thought of Mi's asthma, of Thomas's granddaughter, of Mr. Wilson and his wife, of all the families affected by whatever NextGen was dumping into their water. "I can't," she whispered. "Too many people are getting sick. Our daughter is getting sick." That night, they sent May to stay with Lisa's sister in the city. Then Lisa retrieved her backup research files from their hiding place in the forgotten storage space under the stairs. She'd anticipated something like this might happen. The next morning, an unsigned letter arrived in their mailbox. "Juropate Enado or Lose EVERT gang." Instead of frightening her, the crude threat solidified Lisa's resolve. She drove to the town's edge where cell service was spotty at best, making her harder to track. She called Dinga. "They broke into my house, stole my research." "Same here," Dinga replied. "But I was expecting it. I have everything backed up on secure servers. They're getting desperate, Lisa. That means we're close to something big." "What's our next move?" "We need something they can't steal or intimidate away. We need someone from inside the company, someone high up enough to know what's really happening." Lisa thought for a moment. "I might know someone. The former head of chemical engineering retired last year. His widow still lives in town. Mrs. Winters. She volunteers at the library book sales. Can you talk to her?" Lisa watched a NextGen truck drive slowly past her parked car. "I'll try. But we need to be more careful now. They're not just watching anymore." As she hung up, a text from an unknown number appeared on her phone. "North entrance of Old Mill. 7 p.m. Come alone. I can help you." Lisa sat in her car outside the abandoned mill, heart pounding. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the crumbling brick building. She told Mike where she was going, made him promise to call the police if she didn't check in by 8:30. "This is crazy," she whispered to herself, clutching her phone. But she thought of May's inhaler, of Thomas's granddaughter, of all the sick people in town. With a deep breath, she stepped out of the car. The north entrance was overgrown with weeds, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Lisa turned on her phone's flashlight and stepped inside, the beam cutting through dancing dust particles. "Hello," she called, her voice echoing. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman in her 70s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. "Mrs. Winters." Lisa gasped in surprise. The older woman nodded. "I've been watching you, Mrs. Chen. You've been asking questions about NextGen, the right questions." Mrs. Winters led Lisa to a small office at the back of the mill. "My husband Harold was chief chemical engineer at NextGen for 30 years. He designed most of their disposal systems." "Why are we meeting like this?" Lisa asked. "You could have talked to me at the library." Mrs. Winters' face hardened. "Because they watch me too. Harold didn't just retire last year. He was forced out when he started objecting to changes in the waste disposal protocols." She pulled a key from around her neck. "Before he died, he gave me this. Said if anyone ever started asking the right questions, I should share what he left." She led Lisa to an old filing cabinet and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a weathered fireproof box. Harold knew what the company was doing was wrong. He kept records, his insurance policy, he called it. But then he got sick. So fast. Her voice faltered. "Brain cancer. Gone in 6 months." Lisa helped Mrs. Winters lift the heavy box onto the desk. Inside were hundreds of pages of documents, USB drives, and notebooks filled with Harold's precise handwriting. He documented everything, Mrs. Winters explained as Lisa leafed through the files. Internal memos about contamination levels, emails ordering test results to be altered, records of health complaints from workers that were buried. Lisa's hands trembled as she examined a folder labeled Project Clearwater. "What is this?" she asked. "That's the worst of it," Mrs. Winters said quietly. "It was a deliberate strategy. They knew about the groundwater contamination 10 years ago. Instead of fixing it, they created a plan to hide the evidence while they expanded operations." Lisa read through the documents with growing horror. Project Clearwater detailed how NextGen had systematically falsified environmental reports, manipulated water samples before testing, and even created a mathematical model to predict which neighborhoods would see increased cancer rates. Information they used not to protect residents, but to direct their property purchases to create buffer zones. They knew, Lisa whispered. They knew people would get sick. Yes, Mrs. Winters confirmed. Harold realized too late what he'd been part of. He tried to stop it, to fix it. That's when they pushed him out. Lisa looked up from the papers. "Why didn't you take this to the authorities?" Mrs. Winters gave a bitter laugh. "The mayor? The police chief? The state inspector who gets donations for his political campaigns from NextGen? I tried. Nobody would listen to an old woman. But you've been building something, a team of people who can make this public in a way that can't be ignored." As they carefully packed the documents, Mrs. Winters grabbed Lisa's arm. "Be careful. The last person who tried to expose them had a car accident. The brakes failed on a mountain road." Lisa felt cold dread settle in her stomach. Was it really an accident? "The police said so," Mrs. Winters replied, but Harold never believed it. Outside, the night had fully descended. Lisa helped Mrs. Winters to her car, then loaded the precious box into her own trunk, covering it with an old blanket. "What happens now?" Mrs. Winters asked. Lisa thought of Dina, Dr. Wong, Dr. Lin, and Thomas, each bringing their own expertise to the fight. "Now we have what we need. We can prove everything." As she drove away, Lisa didn't notice the car parked down the road, its headlights dark, or the man inside speaking urgently into his phone. She met with Winters. She's got the files. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. Lisa, Dina, Dr. Wong, Dr. Lin, and Thomas worked around the clock in a small motel room 30 miles from Pinecrest. They spread Harold Winters' documents across the beds and taped papers to the walls, connecting the evidence with colored strings like detectives in a crime movie. "This is bigger than we thought," Dina said, pacing between the beds. "They've been dumping chemicals for 15 years. The internal reports show they knew exactly what would happen. Dr. Wong had verified the water test results. These contaminant levels are 10 times what's legally allowed. The documents prove they've been falsifying official samples. Dr. Lin had been analyzing health records. The cancer rates in Pinecrest are 42% higher than state averages. And look at this, internal NextGen reports predicting acceptable illness levels in different neighborhoods. They calculated how many people would get sick and decided it was worth the savings on proper disposal." Lisa's hands shook as she read an email from a NextGen executive. "Cleanup costs exceed 40M. Alternative disposal method saves us 38M. Legal settlement projections for resulting illnesses estimated at max 10M. Recommendation. Proceed with alternative disposal." "They did a cost-benefit analysis on human lives," she whispered. Thomas nodded grimly. "That's how they've always operated. Numbers on a spreadsheet, not people." Dinah had been working on the article day and night, fueled by coffee and determination. "It's ready," she finally announced. "My editor is terrified but agrees this has to run." The night before publication, Lisa called Mike. "Stay with Mai at my sister's tonight. Don't come home until I call you." "Is it happening?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning. Front page." There was a long pause. "Be careful. I love you." "I love you too." Lisa barely slept that night, jumping at every sound outside her motel room. At 5 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Dina. "It's live." The headline of the Regional Tribune read, Deadly CTC rates. NextGen Industries' 15-year toxic dumping scheme exposed. The article detailed everything: the contaminated water, the falsified reports, Project Clearwater, the calculated illness projections, and the personal stories of affected families. Dina had done a masterful job balancing technical details with human impact. By 7 a.m., national news outlets were picking up the story. By 9 a.m., NextGen's stock price had dropped 12%. At 10 a.m., the company issued a terse statement. NextGen Industries categorically denies these defamatory allegations and will pursue all legal remedies against those responsible for spreading false information. Our environmental record is exemplary, and we remain committed to the health and welfare of the communities we serve. Lisa watched the statement on TV from the motel room, surrounded by the very documents proving everything they'd reported was true. By noon, NextGen's lawyers had filed an emergency injunction to stop further publication of unverified claims. But it was too late. The story had gone viral. Videos of Mason Creek's discolored water were trending online. Former NextGen employees were coming forward with their own stories. At 2 p.m., Lisa's phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Mrs. Chen." The voice was smooth, professional. "This is Gregory Phillips, Chief Counsel for NextGen Industries. I think it's time we had a conversation about your concerns." "I have nothing to say to you," Lisa replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mrs. Chen, surely we can resolve this without further unpleasantness. Your husband's position at NextGen is still secure. Your daughter's college fund could be substantially increased. All we ask is a retraction of certain, exaggerated claims." Lisa thought of the families who had lost loved ones, of May's breathing problems, of Mrs. Winter's husband dying of brain cancer after trying to do the right thing. "The documents speak for themselves, Mr. Phillips, and they've been shared with the EPA, the State Attorney General's office, and 3 national news organizations. There's no putting this back in the box." "You've made a serious mistake," Phillips said, his voice hardening. "We will bury you in litigation. Your family will." Lisa hung up. An hour later, black SUVs with federal government plates pulled up outside the NextGen main facility. Men and women in EPA jackets entered the building carrying document boxes and sampling equipment. Dina called, breathless with excitement. "Lisa, the Attorney General just announced a formal investigation, and I've heard from 12 families ready to file a class action lawsuit." For the first time in weeks, Lisa allowed herself to smile. "It's really happening." "Yes," Dina agreed. "They can't hide anymore. The truth is out." As Lisa watched the news coverage, her phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "We're so proud of you. When is it safe to come home?" She looked out the window at the gathering media trucks and replied, "Not just yet, but soon." 6 months passed like a whirlwind. Spring arrived in Pinecrest, bringing fresh green leaves to the maple trees along Main Street, but the town would never be the same. Lisa sat on her front porch, watching May ride her bike up and down the sidewalk. The girls' breathing had improved since they'd switched to bottled water for everything: drinking, cooking, even brushing teeth. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. "More lemonade?" Mike asked, stepping outside with a pitcher. Since NextGen had shut down operations for the government-mandated cleanup, he'd found work at a factory 2 towns over. The commute was longer, but as he often said, at least he could sleep at night. "Thanks," Lisa smiled, holding out her glass. "Any news on the hearings?" Mike nodded. Thomas called. The former CEO and 2 vice presidents were indicted this morning. Criminal charges for environmental violations, fraud, and reckless endangerment. Lisa exhaled slowly. After months of investigations, depositions, and legal maneuvering, justice was finally coming. 3 top executives would face prison time. The company had already agreed to a $400 million settlement fund for affected families and environmental cleanup. "Mom, watch this," May called, standing on her bike pedals as she coasted down the gentle slope. Lisa waved and smiled, though her throat tightened with emotion. How many children in Pinecrest had gotten sick? How many would have continued getting sick if they hadn't exposed the truth? Her phone buzzed with a text from Dina. "Just won the Peterson Award for Investigative Journalism. Couldn't have done it without you. lunch tomorrow. Since breaking the NextGen story, Dina's career had skyrocketed. She'd appeared on national news programs and was working on a book about corporate environmental crimes. Dr. Wong and Dr. Lin had received research grants to study the long-term health effects of the specific chemicals NextGen had dumped. Their work was already helping doctors develop better treatments for the affected families. Mrs. Winters had become something of a local hero. At the town hall meetings that followed the scandal, she spoke powerfully about her husband's struggle to expose the truth. The park by Mason Creek would be renamed in Harold's honor once the cleanup was complete. The doorbell rang, interrupting Lisa's thoughts. "I'll get it," Mike said, heading inside. He returned moments later with a young couple Lisa didn't recognize. "This is Ben and Judy," Mike explained. "They're interested in the neighborhood watch program you mentioned starting." After the NextGen scandal, Lisa had discovered something unexpected: a talent for organizing people. What had begun as a small group fighting a corporation had evolved into a community movement. "We just moved here last month," Judy explained. "Everyone told us we were crazy moving to that toxic town, but we believe in what you're doing, building something better from the ashes." Lisa invited them to sit. "Pinecrest is changing. We're not just cleaning up the water, we're cleaning up how things work around here. New town council, new priorities." Ben nodded. "That's why we came. My background is in renewable energy. We're hoping to be part of the solution." After they left, promising to attend the community meeting that weekend, Lisa checked her email. The Pinecrest Environmental Justice Foundation, her new full-time job, had received another donation. People from across the country had been contributing since they heard the story. "What are you smiling about?" Mike asked, sitting beside her again. "Just thinking about how different things are now. A year ago, I was just a librarian worried about my daughter's asthma. Now you're the woman who brought down a corporate giant," Mike finished. Lisa shook her head. "No, that's not it. We all did that together. But I found something I didn't know I had in me. I found my voice." As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the neighborhood, Lisa watched families emerge from their homes to enjoy the pleasant evening. Children played in yards. Neighbors chatted across fences. There was a sense of renewal in the air. NextGen was reopening soon under new management, with strict environmental monitoring and community oversight. Most importantly, people were no longer afraid to speak up when something seemed wrong. Mai pedaled up to the porch, cheeks flushed with healthy color. "Can we walk down to the creek tomorrow? I want to see how the cleanup is going." "Sure," Lisa nodded. "It's our creek after all. We should keep an eye on it." Some days Lisa still couldn't believe everything that had happened. How ordinary people with determination could stand up to power and win. How a small discovery in a library archive could change so many lives. But then she'd look at her daughter breathing easier, at her community healing together, and she'd know the simple truth: sometimes the most important stories are the ones we decide to tell, even when everyone says to stay silent.